The following program is a high-definition production of Blue Ridge PBS.
Hello, and welcome to What It Takes. I'm Dr. Rose Martin, Director of Education Services here at Blue Ridge PBS. On today's show, we're talking about preschool readiness, the lifelong benefits of early education programs, and why it provides an excellent return on your investment. Joining the conversation today, I'm welcoming Dr. Craig Ramey, a world-renowned child development researcher and developmental psychologist. He is a distinguished research scholar of human development at the Virginia Tech Carilion Research Institute, professor of psychology at Virginia Tech, and professor of pediatrics at the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine. He specializes in the study of factors affecting children's health and the development of intelligence, social competence, and academic achievement. Dr. Ramey's role as advisor to national administrations has informed national and international policy on education and child health care. Over the past 40 years, he and his wife Sharon have published hundreds of manuscripts, authored several books, and have conducted research with over 100,000 children in more than 40 states. Their Abecedarian project was featured in the documentary My Brilliant Brain. The Rameys are currently leading an exciting project right here, the Roanoke Brain Study. What that's doing is developing community outreach programs, teaming researchers with schools, community organizations, and families right here in Southwest Virginia to better understand the factors of healthy brain development in children and how to maximize each child's potential. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Chris Myers joins us today. Chris is the program manager for Smart Beginnings Greater Roanoke. She is at the heart of everything local. When it comes to early learning, Chris has her finger on the pulse of everything exciting. Her work in the field with community leaders from business to school systems and nonprofit organizations focuses on a goal of every child entering kindergarten with the skills they need, and as Chris likes to say, ready for school and be ready for life. So I welcome both of you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Rose. Good to be here.
And I say to each of you, did you know that the first 1,000 days between conception and age 2 are critical for a child's development? And that 700 new neural connections are created every second? Did you know that the number of different words a baby hears each day predicts intelligence, later success in school, and social competence? Did you know that achievement gaps develop before kindergarten? In fact, disadvantaged children can start kindergarten as much as 18 months behind their peers. Did you know that those children who enter kindergarten unprepared are more likely to perform below grade level in 3rd grade and are unlikely to ever catch up? Are you aware that low 3rd grade reading scores are used to predict future crime rates? And those scores are used as estimates for future jail and prison populations? It's true. So I say, Dr. Ramey, are we in a national crisis on this issue right now?
Well, I think we have learned over the last 2 decades that what happens early in life is much more important than we ever thought before. And if children don't receive the kind of social stimulation, the kind of loving care, their consequences downstream are pretty bleak. And so what I would love for parents to know is that they are important to their children every single moment that they're in contact with them. And we have some really good clues as to what makes for a healthy, happy child that I hope we get to pass on to parents in this conversation.
And it's interesting to hear that. Chris, what do you see when you're out in the field? Do you see a crisis of early childhood development?
There's sort of 2 sides to it. I think some people don't recognize the importance of those first 5 years before they enter kindergarten, and others jump to the extreme of now we've got to cram a bunch of academics down these little kids' heads. And so there's sort of a balance in there of really using what the research tells us about the importance of early brain development, but doing it in ways that really nurture children and support those higher level thinking skills that are not just good for school, but good down the road too.
Okay, so if we talk about brain development and we're talking about environment and those early experiences, what are some of those clues that you mentioned that we know about?
Well, children give us lots of clues if we look carefully. They tell us when they are ready for something new, and they tell us when they've had enough. And parents who are able to read their children know that they're able to provide an almost unlimited amount of conversation and an almost unlimited amount of what I call responsive care, and their children will stay engaged for long periods of time. But it requires the same kinds of skills that any good conversation has. You have to be a listener as well as a talker. You have to be aware of what the other person is contributing. You have to be responsive to, and if one is responsive, children will tell you that they are very eager to engage.
What are some of those ways that parents can learn to read their children?
Well, to realize that children's natural tendency is to explore, but what happens when they explore will determine whether they remain explorers or not. So paying attention and giving approval when children sort of branch out and try something new. When children branch out and try something new, they frequently have questions. That's a good opportunity for parents to become mentors, to sort of let the child know in a sort of a nice, easy way, kind of how the world works, sort of the ins and outs. I mean, children aren't born knowing much of anything, and so they have to figure out colors and shapes and what a conversation is. They have to learn what, are they supposed to speak English or French or Spanish or, so almost everything children need to know when they get to school, they need to learn from somebody, and somebody who loves them and cares for them and really has their best interests at heart. And people are important for young children pretty much in proportion to the amount of time they spend with them. So parents, child development teachers, babysitters, they're all important if they spend hours with the child.
So what are some specific things that you do with babies or you do with toddlers? Parents as first teachers, what do we do?
You know, sometimes I show these little videos of, I look back at me with my first son and he's sitting there in the high chair and, you know, you're doing the feeding of them, but you're talking to them about, oh, do you like that? Does that taste good? Oh, no, you don't like that. And you're almost putting words into their mouth, like that old movie, Look Who's Talking with the baby. But you're sort of giving them that language before they're ready for it, and they're just soaking it in. And sometimes, you know, repeating those simple words, like, oh, I can tell you want more. And that eye contact, it's such little things, but that's how they learn to communicate. And by having that repetition and the moms saying these things every day, that's how they're picking up these words and how I talk and interact with them. And then looking at books, of course, you can't start too early, you know, to just look at a book with a baby. It may seem like they're not getting a lot out of it, but even when you're holding them in your arms, they're picking up that rhythm of language, and that sort of sets the stage for the language that they learn at home, no matter what language that is.
So if we're doing these things at home, and from the time that they're babies and now they're toddlers, how do we know when they're actually ready to get to school? We hear about being ready, preschool readiness. What does that mean, and how do we know?
Well, I think that in every culture we have a set of expectations of the kind of skills that we expect children to have when they enter into some kind of group situation. Some of those skills are, of course, social, being able to take turns, to pay attention when someone else is speaking. But we also have expectations, for example, that children will know that letters are used to form words, and that words really represent speech that's been written down in this code. And so some kids get lots and lots and lots of experiences, whether they're in the supermarket or they're in the pediatrician's office or they have a babysitter who's providing care for them while the parents go out for an evening. We end up in most places having a set of minimal skills that we expect children to have. And all across the country now, there are kindergarten assessments being done. The idea isn't really to determine whether the child is ready for kindergarten. The idea is to determine what kindergarten needs to do to undergird the further development of that child. And children can come to kindergarten at 5 years of age, and some of those children will look like typical 5-year-olds. Some may look so advanced that they're really like 7 or 8-year-olds, and some may be behind enough that they look more like 3-year-olds. And so we give the kindergarten teacher one tremendous task when we say, teach the kids at the top, but especially bring the kids at the bottom along so that we're closing some of these gaps. And I think that kindergarten teachers are among my heroes and heroines in the world, because they take on the really big problems in our society. And they do a wonderful job of it, but they need a lot of support to pull off what we're asking them to do.
So what makes a difference between those children who come in as 7 or 8-year-olds or the ones that come in as 3-year-olds, and how do we mitigate that? How do we make sure that that doesn't continue to happen?
So a really simple thing that we brought up a little bit is that idea of having that experience with books. When I first taught kindergarten, we would do just a really quick assessment where we would give a child a book upside down and backwards and ask them to show us the front of the book. Most of the children could do that. A few couldn't. And if they don't just have those experiences with books and sitting and listening to a grown-up read a story to them, that puts them at a big disadvantage, because a lot of just listening and following directions and those types of conversations can happen. So there's got to be that language and literacy environment, along with a lot of other high-quality things going on in their early years.
And you said high quality. That term gets kind of tossed around a lot, right? So I'm hearing reading books. I can do that at home. So why would we need to go to something, a more formalized program? Why do we even need that?
Well, our population has changed dramatically over the last 4 decades, last 40 years. It used to be that the majority of children who were under, let's say, age 5 had mothers who were at home. But beginning in the early 60s, we began to develop an expectation that women would become more formally educated and would go into the paid labor force. When the former welfare bills were being rewritten into what is now called TANF, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, a stipulation was put in that if you were to receive TANF resources for a while, you would either be continuing your education, if you were a mother, or you'd be employed. So now we have the situation where the vast majority of women, even with children under the age of 1, are in the paid labor force. Well, if that's the case, then we need to evolve a new form of family support and a new form of care. And so now we have a variety of child development centers, sometimes called daycare centers, sometimes called early childhood education schools, all of which are really, in my opinion, in the education business. Because what children receive is their education. And sometimes that's of high quality, and sometimes it leaves something to be desired.
Well, and Chris, you're working in the Virginia Star Quality Initiative, trying to do high quality experiences and things for children and for families right here. And that's just not in our area. It's also statewide and nationwide. Is that true?
Yeah, quality rating and improvement systems are nationwide, where they're really looking at the variety of child care centers and early childhood programs and really trying to distinguish what higher quality looks like and why that matters, and then working with programs to help them improve. So in Virginia, it's called the Virginia Star Quality Initiative, and it's being done around the state, and we're coordinating it here in the greater Roanoke region.
So if we have children that are able to experience these high quality programs, and then we can move them into kindergarten, we can decrease those gaps and get them started to where they're on an even playing field, then all of that being said, let's talk about lifelong benefits then. If this is so important from conception through age 5, just to get to that point, what do we see as lifelong benefits for these kids?
Well, we know from our own research, and our own research is supported by other research teams as well, that if children arrive at kindergarten ready to do what kindergarten teachers expect them to do, they, in comparison to children who don't arrive so prepared, They are more likely to read better all the way through elementary school, junior high school, through high school, and even out into adulthood. They are better able to do mathematics at a variety of levels. They are less likely to be retained in grade because they don't have the skills to be promoted to the next grade. They are 75% less likely to need special education. And when they become adults, they are more likely to be employed at higher skilled occupations, to earn more money, to join the middle class, and to have fewer mental health problems, and in some studies, dramatic decreases in the likelihood of being involved in crime. So there's a cascade of benefits, all of which are positive. There has yet to be the first study published to show that high quality early childhood education produces something that society doesn't want. So our friend Jim Heckman, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in the year 2000, has made a strong case that the return on investment is the equivalent to about 12% per year. And I don't know about most people out there listening to this program, but most of us aren't earning 12% a year on any of our investments, especially today. And so his argument is this is one of the best investments that one can make worldwide, not just in the Roanoke Valley, or not just in Virginia, not just in the United States, but worldwide, and has become a very effective spokesman for that perspective, which I wholeheartedly endorse.
Now, which children are we looking at to make this investment in?
Well, I think we're talking about all children.
We are.
All children need the same things. Some children, by virtue of the families they're born into and the level of resources that's available and what was available to their parents, get those things almost everywhere they go. Other children, it's not so much true for. So for the children who are born into economically poor families that are undereducated for a particular cultural place, those are the kids who tend to benefit the most from these high quality pre-kindergarten programs. It's a really wonderful finding, and it's been now replicated in our own research in 11 different places around the country. The kids who need these services the most are the ones who benefit the most, or to say it another way, the kids who are most at risk are the ones who are helped the most when they're exposed to high quality early childhood programs.
Chris, what are you finding on the street right now in these child care centers? You work all over the area here in so many different centers with so many different teachers and so many different families. Are you seeing these benefits from these little ones when you first meet them and getting feedback from the centers?
Yeah, one of the things that comes to my mind right away is we've been working a lot with all of our centers to get more science and hands-on activities in those classrooms. And the kids, you go into those rooms and they can't wait to show you something. I know you came in toward one of them too, and especially those things that get their mind going related to science and nature and outdoors and using that stuff, and you just see them lighting up, and it's very exciting.
What would you want community people to know on how they could help support kids right here who are watching right now?
The first thing is to come and learn a little bit more about what we're doing with Smart Beginnings, learn about the difference in quality at these different centers, and that all preschool programs are not the same, and there are things that are being done and ways to help support teachers. We have different committees looking at how we support parents and educators, and people can get involved and help us that way, and local businesses can find out what they can do, and sometimes they help us with some marketing efforts or providing a free lunch for the teachers when they come to the training, because that's important, and it gets people there and it gets them talking and learning about what we're doing.
If they can't come to one of the centers, I understand you've got quite a social media presence also where people can find lots of information.
Yes, our website, smartbeginningsroanoke.org, has information for early childhood teachers, for parents, and for the business community. And then we have a Facebook page and a Pinterest page now as well that shows high quality learning activities in action.
Can people find specific information, like what do I do with babies, what should I read, what do I...
Absolutely. We actually have the Pinterest page all organized so that there's a general parent resource board, but there's also one specifically for 0 to 12 months, and then for toddlers, for math activities, for science, and all types of different topics on there.
So we want to engage our communities. We want people to realize that this is a really good investment on those dollars. We mentioned earlier, and you had alluded to the fact that decreases in crime and prison populations, and okay, but what about people who are watching to say, you know, why should I put money or allocate funds to doing this right now? I'm still not quite sold. Why should they vote for it? Why should they encourage their legislators to get involved?
Well, let me take a cut at that.
You go right ahead.
If we want to have a participatory democracy and a competitive capitalism in this country, we need smart people. And the kinds of jobs that used to be available that you could get with low skills are rapidly going away. And we need people who have a good, strong work ethic, who are socially poised, who have a sense of conscience about how the community functions and their role in it. Those are pretty high-level kinds of skills. That's different from what we used to do. I'm an old farm boy, and I used to, you know, help make hay and throw it onto the wagons. Well, you know, now that's all being done with big machines that someone, so you don't have to do all that sort of stuff. But whether it's pumping gas or washing dishes, I mean, the low-level jobs are no longer there, and we all expect in this country that we are self-supporting, that we support our families. And so we all have a stake in each other's development and level of performance. None of us, as the poet John Donne said, none of us is an island unto ourselves. We're all part of the fabric of our society. And we benefit when other people do well.
So how do we evaluate these funding decisions and these policy issues? If, as you say, we need to have more action, we need to get people more involved, how do we get to the people and how do we evaluate those decisions to make sure that people are getting a great return on their dollar?
Well, I'm a scientist, and what that means is that I'm prone to want to measure things. And I think that whether one is in medicine or in the social sciences or economics, I think that there is a realization now that we must be as efficient as we can be. Not just effective, meaning we're accomplishing what it is we set out to do, but that we're doing it with the most judicious use of resources, because the needs in our society are large. And so the only way that we know to get beyond sort of the anecdote, the storytelling, is to collect, analyze data, and then bring together smart people to discuss what the data mean, what directions might be considered, what things are supported by evidence. And so this idea of evidence-based practices, whether it's in education, it's in healthcare, it's in business, that idea is here. And I think that we are ready to meet that challenge, but we really need the general population to understand that that is a desirable thing to do, and that it's value added. Of course, the business community has known this for a long time, and they've been measuring and making decisions on this basis, you know, forever.
Sure. So if we take that, and we've got so much more to talk about, and we're almost to the end of our time. Chris, I want you to just think about what would be something you would like to leave people with, to think about the importance of what they can do right now and why it matters.
You know, just sort of hitting home on that piece again of how important those first 5 years are, and that 85% of the brain develops before the age of 5, but most of our investment in education happens after the age of 5. And if that's putting us 5 years behind down the road, so if we put the emphasis there, we're only going to strengthen the education system all the way through.
Great advice, thank you. And Craig, what about you? What would your final thought be?
Well, I would build on what was just said. I think that if we assume that we are all teachers to the extent that we encounter children, and that we will leave some residue in their brain from our interactions or lack thereof, then we become teachers of individual children in proportion to how much time we spend with them. And I think that that should give us a sense of responsibility, a sense of urgency to be as positive and as contributory as we can be. And if we do that, then I think that we'll be laying the groundwork for children to have a lifelong positive experience.
And I'm going to leave it there, because what a wonderful way to close and to leave our viewers with the hope that we can do this, and we must.
It is
and
within
there
our
is a
reach.
return on our investment is within our reach. Well, as you've heard, the first 5 years of life represent the single greatest chance we have to impact a child's future. This is the time they learn how to learn. And it's scary to think that thousands of our children start kindergarten already behind, like we heard today. But it doesn't have to stay that way. We can fight poverty and equalize educational opportunity. We've heard today how each of us can make a difference and some things we can do. We can help every child be ready for school and ready for life. I want to thank my guests and you for spending time with us today. For information about today's topic, to watch this program again, or share it with someone you know, visit our website, blueridgepbs.org. Programs like this are made possible because of you, and I thank you for your support.